Be me, Enzo. I'm a simple guy, I guess. For the last 5 or so years, my life has followed a very predictable, very stable pattern. Wake up, commute, work, commute, eat, sleep, repeat. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and I'm damn good at what I do. My job is technical, detail-oriented. It requires focus. So I've cultivated an environment for myself that allows for maximum focus. My desk is in a corner, clean, with only the essentials. I'm usually the first one in the office, around 7:30 a.m. The first thing I do is put on my noise-canceling headphones. It's not about being antisocial. It's about creating a bubble where I can just get into the zone and code or design or whatever the main task of the day is. For hours, the only thing that exists is my screen, my keyboard, and the instrumental tracks playing in my ears. It's my version of peace. My colleagues get it. They know if they need me. A quick email or a tap on the shoulder is all it takes. I'll take off the headphones, solve the problem, and then dive right back in. No drama, no office politics, just pure, unadulterated productivity. The boss, an old-school guy who cares about results and nothing else, loves me for it. He once said that my output is worth 3 of anyone else's, and he doesn't care if I do it standing on my head, as long as it gets done. That's the kind of arrangement that works for me. Our team was a well-oiled machine. A few quiet guys like me, a couple of more sociable dudes who handle the client-facing stuff, and a few women who are just as professional and focused. We all had our roles, and we respected each other's space. The atmosphere was professional, quiet, and efficient. Then Violeta joined. I think it was sometime in the fall when the weather was starting to turn. The announcement came in a Monday morning email. Please welcome Violeta to the team. She was a transfer from another department, one that was known more for its, let's call it, ideological zeal than its actual output. Her first day, she made her presence known. While the rest of us had maybe a family photo or a company mug on our desks, hers was immediately covered in stickers and posters with slogans. I didn't read them closely, but you could get the gist from a distance. Lots of fists and aggressive-looking fonts. The first change was the noise level. Violeta was a talker. She didn't seem to have an inside voice. Every conversation was a performance, every opinion a declaration. The quiet hum of the office was replaced by her monologues about the patriarchy, systemic issues, and the latest outrage she'd read about online. Most of us just adopted the nod and smile strategy. You learn quickly that engagement is a trap. I, of course, was mostly immune to this, thanks to my headphones. I'd see her talking animatedly out of the corner of my eye, but in my bubble, there was only silence and work. I think this is what first drew her attention to me. I wasn't giving her an audience. I was a black hole where her proclamations and her personality were supposed to be, and it was just nothing. Her first attempt to engage with me was maybe a week after she started. I was deep into debugging a particularly nasty piece of code. I felt a shadow fall over my desk and then a sharp tap on my shoulder. I jumped a little, pulled off my headphones, and turned. It was Violeta, standing with her arms crossed, a weirdly analytical look on her face. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. "Can I help you?" I asked. Her response was not what I expected. She said something about it being fascinating how men use things like headphones to create physical barriers and ignore the voices of their female colleagues. I just blinked at her. I was expecting a question about a project file or a server issue. I waited a beat, thinking it was some kind of strange joke. It wasn't. She was completely serious. "I'm just trying to concentrate," I said, as politely as I could. "Is there something work-related you needed?" The question seemed to offend her. She scoffed, said something under her breath about typical toxic avoidance, and walked away. I just sat there for a second, confused, before putting my headphones back on and trying to find my place in the code again. But the bubble had been popped. From that day on, I became her project. She seemed to interpret my entire existence as a personal affront to her belief system. My quietness wasn't introversion, it was aggressive silence. My focus wasn't professionalism, it was a refusal to engage in collaborative, emotional labor. I know these terms because I started hearing them from other people. She was talking about me a lot. To anyone who would listen, she would frame my normal, boring work habits as a sinister manifestation of male toxicity. A few weeks later, we had a team meeting. I was presenting a quarterly progress report. I was walking everyone through the data, keeping it concise and to the point. At one point, addressing the whole team, I said something like, "So as you guys can see, we're ahead of schedule on this module." Before I could even move to the next slide, Violeta's hand shot up. The boss sighed, but nodded at her. She stood up, as if she were in a courtroom, and launched into a prepared speech about how my use of the word guys was exclusionary, a form of linguistic marginalization that renders the women in the room invisible. The room went completely silent. You could feel the collective cringe. Two of the other women on the team were visibly trying not to roll their eyes. I just stood there, holding the remote for the projector, not sure how to respond. Thankfully, the boss stepped in. He didn't even look at her. He just looked at me and said, "Enzo, please continue with your report on the project's excellent progress." The emphasis he put on excellent progress was not subtle. It was a clear message. Results matter. Your performance art does not. Violeta sat down, fuming. For the rest of the meeting, she stared daggers at me. Her campaign against me escalated after that. She started trying to create situations where my lack of reaction could be framed as a deliberate, hostile act. The most bizarre incident was with the coffee. I was at my desk, in the zone as usual. She walked past, carrying a full mug. As she got right next to my chair, she made this exaggerated whoops sound and accidentally sloshed half of her coffee onto the floor, just inches from my feet and my computer bag. It was so obviously deliberate. She then stood there, looking at me, clearly expecting me to leap up, apologize for her clumsiness, and start cleaning it up for her. I think in her mind, if I did, it would prove men are conditioned to serve. If I didn't, it would prove I was a callous, unhelpful misogynist, a perfect catch-22. I chose option 3. I looked down at the puddle on the floor. I looked at her. Then I calmly rolled my chair a few feet to the side to avoid the spill and went right back to my work. I didn't say a word. I didn't change my expression. Her plan depended on my reaction. By giving her none, I diffused the entire situation. Her face went through about 5 different emotions at once, ending on pure rage. She muttered something and stormed off towards the kitchen to get paper towels. A colleague who sat across from me caught my eye a few minutes later and just gave me this small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. It felt like a small victory, but it also made me uneasy. This wasn't normal workplace friction. This felt like a crusade. She was trying to build a narrative about me, piece by piece. She would try to corner me in the break room, asking leading questions about my views on social issues. My answers were always the same: brief, neutral, and non-committal. I don't really follow that, or I'm not much of a politics guy. Each non-answer seemed to fuel her conviction that I was hiding some kind of monstrous secret prejudice. To her, a lack of a stated opinion was an admission of guilt. It got to the point where I started eating lunch at my desk, just to avoid the potential for these ambushes. Of course, she later framed this as me being so antisocial he can't even eat in the presence of a strong woman. The atmosphere in the office was becoming tense. People were starting to walk on eggshells around her. Projects were being delayed because team members were afraid to voice opinions that might be misconstrued. She would critique everything through her ideological lens. A project timeline was aggressive and patriarchal. A font choice in a presentation was problematic. Productivity, the one thing our boss cared about, started to dip. And all the while, her focus remained on me, the silent, non-compliant symbol of everything she was fighting against. I just kept my head down. I kept working. I figured, my work speaks for itself. My professionalism is my shield. As long as I do my job perfectly and give her absolutely nothing to work with, I'm safe. That was my mistake. I underestimated her creativity. When you can't find a monster, you can just create one out of thin air. The final phase began subtly. I noticed she was watching me more. Not in an overt, confrontational way anymore, but from a distance. I'd look up from my screen and see her staring at me over the top of her monitor. She started carrying a little notebook around, and she'd scribble in it after any interaction involving me, no matter how minor. If a colleague asked me for help, and I spent 5 minutes at their desk, she'd write it down. If I was 5 minutes late back from lunch, she'd write it down. It was unnerving, to say the least. I felt like I was being documented for a trial I didn't even know I was a part of. The other colleagues noticed too. The mood shifted from annoyance at her to a kind of quiet pity for me. They knew what was happening, but nobody wanted to be the one to step in and become her next target. I can't blame them. Corporate environments are all about self-preservation. And then the email arrived. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I think. The subject line was bland and corporate. Meeting invitation, a discussion on workplace environment. It was from the head of HR. My boss was CC'd, and so was Violeta. My stomach dropped. I knew instantly what this was. This was it, the culmination of her entire campaign. I spent the next hour before the meeting in a cold sweat. I went over every interaction in my head. Had I ever said anything even remotely inappropriate? Had I ever lost my cool? No. I had been a gray rock, a boring, professional, emotionless wall. But I knew that didn't matter. In the modern corporate world, the accusation is often the conviction. The process is the punishment. I walked into the conference room right on time. They were all there already. The HR manager, a woman who always looked stressed. My boss, looking impatient and annoyed at having his time wasted. And Violeta. She was sitting opposite the door, and she had this look on her face. It wasn't triumphant or smug, not exactly. It was a look of serene, righteous certainty. In her mind, she was about to do something noble and just. She was about to slay the dragon. I was the dragon. I sat down, and the HR manager started the meeting. She pulled out a folder. It was thick. She started talking in that careful, sanitized HR speak. She explained that a formal complaint had been filed regarding my behavior. She said the company takes all such allegations with the utmost seriousness. Then, she started to read from the complaint. It was a masterpiece of fiction. According to the document, I was guilty of a sustained campaign of psychological intimidation. My focused work and use of headphones were described as a deliberate tactic of exclusion and creating an audibly hostile environment. My refusal to engage in her baited conversations was a clear example of patriarchal stonewalling. The coffee incident was twisted into me callously ignoring a female colleague in a moment of distress, thereby reinforcing gendered power dynamics. It went on and on. Every mundane non-event of the past few months had been meticulously documented and twisted through her ideological funhouse mirror until it came out looking monstrous. She had even listed specific dates and times for my infractions. On October 5th, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Enzo stared at me for a full 3 seconds with a hostile expression after I asked a work-related question. I didn't even know what she was talking about. I probably just had a bug in my code I was thinking about. When the HR manager finished reading, the room was silent. She looked at me, expecting a response. Violeta was looking at me too, with that same serene, righteous expression. My boss was just staring at the folder on the table, his face unreadable. I took a breath. I looked directly at the HR manager. "None of that is true," I said. My voice was steady. "I come to work, I put on my headphones, and I do my job. I am professional with everyone. I have never intimidated or been hostile to anyone in this office." Violeta jumped in immediately. She said that my denial was predictable, that men are conditioned to not even see their own toxicity. She claimed she felt unsafe every time she had to walk past my desk. She even managed to squeeze out a few tears, talking about how she was only speaking up for all the other women who were too afraid to. It was a hell of a performance. The HR manager was nodding along sympathetically, scribbling notes. I could see where this was going. A formal warning on my record, mandatory sensitivity training, a black mark on my career that would follow me forever. I felt this sense of utter powerlessness. My years of hard work, my reputation for being the reliable, drama-free guy, all about to be incinerated by a complete fabrication. The HR manager closed her folder and turned to my boss. She started talking about the next steps, mediation sessions, a formal investigation that could take weeks, maybe even moving my desk to create a safer space. I was just about to give up. And then my boss, who had been completely silent for the entire meeting, finally spoke. He held up a hand, and the HR manager stopped talking instantly. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the HR manager. He looked directly at Violeta. "This is a very serious set of accusations," he said, his voice flat and cold. "And I, like this company, take them very seriously." Violeta nodded, a small, confident smile playing on her lips. She thought he was on her side. He continued, "The problem is, right now, all I have are words. Your story and Enzo's story. And frankly, words are cheap." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Fortunately, I don't have to rely on words. This company spent a fortune last year upgrading our security system. We have high-definition cameras with audio recording covering every single inch of that office, except for the bathrooms." He turned his gaze to the HR manager. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to end this meeting right now. Then we're all going to go to my office. I'm going to call security and have them pull the full, unedited recordings from the last 2 months, and we're going to sit there and watch." He looked back at Violeta. Her righteous smile had vanished. Her face had gone completely pale. "We're going to watch everything," he said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. "Every conversation, every incident, every single thing you documented in that little book of yours. And we're going to see what the truth really is. Sound good?" The silence in that conference room was heavier than anything I've ever felt. Violeta looked like she had been tasered. The righteous certainty had completely evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed panic. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The HR manager looked back and forth between Violeta and the boss, her procedural world suddenly thrown into chaos. My boss didn't wait for a response. He stood up. "My office, 5 minutes." He walked out without another word. The walk from the conference room to his office was the longest 50 yards of my life. It wasn't a walk of shame, not for me anyway. It was something else. Violeta was practically stumbling. She was muttering to herself, something about policy and a right to privacy. The HR manager was trying to keep up, whispering about protocol and the need for a more structured approach. I just walked. For the first time in months, the dread in the pit of my stomach was being replaced by something else. A tiny, fragile flicker of hope. The boss's office was large and intimidating, with a big oak desk and a leather couch against one wall. On the credenza behind his desk, was a massive monitor, usually displaying market trends or project dashboards. Right now, it was blank. We all filed in. He pointed to the couch for Violeta and the HR manager. He pointed to a chair next to his desk for me. It felt like being seated for a jury trial. He sat down, picked up his phone, and hit a speed dial button. "Security," he said into the receiver. "It's me. I need the full video and audio archives for the main office floor, Section 4. Pull everything from the 1st of September until today. I want it patched through to my office monitor, now." There was a pause. He listened for a second, his eyes fixed on Violeta. "No, not a highlights reel. Everything. And I want a time-stamped log of all files accessed. Yes, I'm aware of the policy. My authority overrides it. Get it done." He hung up the phone. Violeta found her voice. It was shaky. She started talking about how this was an intimidation tactic, that reviewing footage without a specific pre-approved cause was a violation of corporate ethics. The HR manager chimed in, weakly, about needing to consult the employee handbook on surveillance. The boss just held up his hand again. "A formal complaint of sustained psychological harassment and the creation of a hostile work environment is my cause," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "This is no longer an HR issue about hurt feelings. This is a fact-finding investigation, and I am finding the facts." The huge monitor flickered to life. A login screen appeared, then a complex-looking interface with a grid of camera feeds. A security tech's voice came through the desk phone's speaker, confirming the feed was live and asking for instructions. "Let's start with the complaint," the boss said, picking up the thick folder Violeta had prepared. He opened it to the first page. Allegation 1. A pattern of deliberate exclusion. Date, September the 14th. Time, approximately 10 a.m. Violeta claims she attempted to engage Enzo in a collaborative dialogue, and he used his headphones to aggressively dismiss her. He relayed the date and time to the security tech. On the screen, a 4-way split appeared, showing my desk from different angles. He maximized the one that showed both me and the walkway. We watched in silence. There I was, typing away. You could see the focus on my face. Then, Violeta appears on screen. She walks up, stands there for a full 10 seconds while I'm clearly in the middle of something, and then taps me hard on the shoulder. The audio kicked in. It was crystal clear. Her voice, fascinating how men use things like headphones to create physical barriers. My voice, calm, not even annoyed. "Can I help you?" Her voice dripping with disdain. My voice still polite. "I'm just trying to concentrate. Is there something work-related you needed?" Her scoff was audible. Then her muttering about toxic avoidance as she walked away. The boss let the video play for another 30 seconds, showing me just shaking my head slightly before refocusing on my work. He looked at Violeta. "Your version of events seems to differ from the recording," he said flatly. "Let's move on." The color was draining from Violeta's face. The HR manager had stopped taking notes. Next, allegation of public shaming through exclusionary language. Team meeting, October 3rd. He gave the new date to the tech. The feed switched to the main conference room camera. We watched my presentation. I was clicking through slides, speaking in a monotone, professional voice. Then came the line, "As you guys can see, we're ahead of schedule." We saw Violeta's hand shoot up. We saw her stand and deliver her speech about marginalization. The audio captured every self-important word. Then it captured the boss's voice, cutting her off. "Enzo, please continue with your report on the project's excellent progress." The boss paused the video. "So, the record shows that you interrupted a business-critical presentation to grandstand, and I immediately shut it down. Not exactly the public shaming you described in your complaint. In fact, it looks like the only person creating an issue in that meeting was you." He didn't even wait for a reply. He was like a shark that had smelled blood in the water. My favorite one, he said, flipping through the pages. The coffee incident. You described this as me callously ignoring a female colleague in distress. Date, October 19th. The tech pulled up the footage. This one was from a high corner camera, giving a perfect, unobstructed view of the whole area. We watched Violeta walk towards my desk, mug in hand. The video was so clear, you could see her glance around to see who was watching. You could see the little adjustment in her grip on the mug right before she got to my chair. The whoops was perfectly timed. The spill was a work of art in its deliberate execution. Then the camera captured the most damning part. Her standing there, staring at me, her expression a mixture of expectation and challenge. We watched my reaction, or rather, my lack of one. I looked down. I looked at her. I rolled my chair away. I went back to work. The footage showed her face contort in frustration and anger before she stormed off. In distress, the boss repeated, his voice laced with sarcasm. It seems the only thing in distress was your plan to create a scene. Violeta was shrinking into the couch. She looked physically smaller than she had an hour ago. She was staring at the floor, refusing to look at the screen. The HR manager just looked sick. She was witnessing the complete implosion of a textbook case she'd been ready to prosecute. Now for the more vague claims, the boss continued, his tone getting colder. The sustained campaign of hostile stares and intimidation. You listed multiple dates where you felt watched and threatened by Enzo. He picked a date at random from her list, November 2nd, 3:30 p.m. The tech pulled it up. It was just me, at my desk, working. At the specified timestamp, I leaned back in my chair and looked up at the ceiling for a few seconds, clearly thinking. Then I leaned forward and started typing again. My gaze hadn't even gone in her direction. The boss had the tech pull up another date from the list, and another. It was all the same. Me working, me thinking, me staring into space as I worked through a problem in my head. Never once was I looking at her. But the cameras did show something else. They showed her, constantly, looking at me, watching me over her monitor. And we saw the little notebook. We watched as she would see me talk to a colleague, and then immediately look down and start scribbling in her book. We watched as she saw me leave for lunch, and she would check her watch and write something down. The boss paused the feed on a clear shot of her, peering at me over her screen, notebook in hand. The camera footage does show a sustained campaign of someone watching someone else, he said, but the roles appear to be reversed. He had saved the best for last. Finally, he said, closing the folder and tossing it onto his desk with a thud. Let's just get a general sense of an average workday. Security, show me a time-lapse of both Enzo's and Violeta's workstations from the last month, side by side. The screen split in two. On the left was my desk. On the right was hers. The tech sped up the footage. Days and nights flew by in minutes. The left screen was a picture of static diligence. My image was a blur of focused activity, hands on the keyboard, only leaving the desk for brief, necessary trips. The right screen was a comedy of inactivity. Her image was a whirlwind of everything but work. She was seen wandering to other desks for long chats. She was on her phone constantly. There were long stretches where her chair was just empty. It was the most brutal, objective, and undeniable performance review I have ever seen. The time-lapse finished. The screen went back to the live feed of the empty office. The silence that followed was absolute. The boss let it hang in the air for a long time. Then he turned in his chair and faced Violeta directly. So, he began, his voice dangerously soft, let me summarize what I've just spent the last hour of my life witnessing. I saw an employee, Enzo, who comes to work, focuses, and produces high-quality results. He bothers no one and responds professionally when bothered. And I saw another employee, you, who appears to do very little actual work. Instead, you spend your time trying to provoke a reaction from a colleague, documenting his every move like a stalker, and then fabricating a series of malicious, career-damaging lies to be filed with HR. He leaned forward. You did not come here with a grievance. You came here with a weapon. You tried to use this company's policies, which are designed to protect actual victims, as a tool to destroy a man's reputation because you didn't like his personality. You are the toxic element in this office. You are the source of the hostile environment. He stood up. Violeta, you are fired, effective immediately. She finally looked up, her face a mess of disbelief and panic. She started to stammer something about wrongful termination, about getting a lawyer. Go right ahead, the boss said, gesturing to the monitor. I'll be happy to provide your lawyer with a copy of these recordings. I'm sure they'll find it very educational. Security is on its way up. They will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings, and then they will escort you out of the building. You have 5 minutes. As if on cue, there was a sharp knock on the door. 2 uniformed security guards came in. The HR manager looked like she was going to be sick. This was a train wreck of epic proportions for her department. Violeta just sat there, frozen. One of the guards had to gently ask her to stand up. They walked her out of the office. She didn't look back. The door clicked shut, and it was just me, the boss, and the deeply shaken HR manager. The boss sat back down and let out a long, heavy sigh. He looked at me. There was no praise, no big speech. That wasn't his style. He just nodded once, a look of grim respect in his eyes. Sorry you had to go through that, Enzo, he said. Get back to work. I nodded back. Thank you, sir. I stood up and left his office. As I walked back onto the main floor, I saw it. Violeta was at her desk, frantically throwing her slogan-covered mugs and personal items into a cardboard box. The 2 security guards stood behind her, silently, arms crossed. Everyone else in the office was pretending to work, but no one was. The silence was electric. Everyone was watching. Everyone knew. I walked back to my corner desk. I sat down. I looked at my screen, at the lines of code I had been working on before my life was interrupted. I took my headphones, wiped them clean with my sleeve, and settled them over my ears. I hit play. The familiar instrumental music filled my head. The bubble was restored. The world outside, with all its noise and its drama, faded away. It was just me, the screen, and the work. And it was peaceful.